Hello, my friends. A couple minutes late here, running around New York, getting a million things done. Get John on here in a few. If you guys haven't checked out last week's conversation with Peter Asher, I think it's a really special one, so I encourage you guys to go back and check it out on my IGTV or the audio version on Spotify and Apple and all that stuff. Or check out the YouTube. The YouTube is a great resource. I've been turning a lot of people onto the YouTube Clips channel when they ask questions because we've covered a lot of things. So if you have questions for us, go to LiveWithMattRad Clips on YouTube. Subscribe there, show us some love, but search amongst our videos. I think there's almost 200 now. And we're going to continue to get a lot more up. So if you have questions for us, they may have already been answered. The other great resource is the Discord. And people have found it's like 500 something people on there. There's a great community of people on there. I can see folks on there from in the chat right now. The Discord is amazing, and it's a great place that actually has a lot more information than I have or any of my guests because there's just so many people. So if you have a question about the profession or about how to get a live snare drum to sound a certain way or really anything, there's all kinds of sub channels on there on the Discord. So the link is in the Live with Matt Rad Instagram bio. You can DM me or somebody can post it on here. But the Discord has become this amazing community that really, really helps people. So please check that out. And I say all that, and I'm going to grab John here. Let's see. Whoa, your hair is wild.
It's so puffy.
It's so puffy. I got to turn you up a little bit. How you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm good. I'm a little tired, but I'm good.
Welcome back from the great country of France. You were in Paris for a while.
And then I quickly jumped over to New York. I didn't see you, but I was only there for like maybe 60 hours. I was in Long Island. My mom retired.
Congrats.
A week ago, and my dad put together a huge like surprise party for her, and it was Nico and I flew in really quick, and it was really nice, like a really special day. People haven't seen it over a decade, and really wholesome time. That's the word for it.
That's fantastic, man. I had a similar but different experience this last weekend when a friend of mine who I've known since college, so for a decade and a half-ish, got married and saw some old friends there. It was not as wholesome. I mean, the wedding was very wholesome. The after party went till 6 a.m. But it was great. I mean, I think I posted something on my Instagram. The idea of measuring friendships in decades is a pretty special thing.
Yes.
There's no real substitute for it. You get a different perspective on yourself and life by knowing people for a very long time. So it was really wonderful to see a lot of people.
So I have I grew up in a neighborhood with 3 families that were all either across the street or next door, and I've known the parents since I was like 4 or 5 years old. We all went to elementary school, and they were all there. I hadn't seen them in forever. And my first friend ever that I've known since preschool, my best friend Chris Rossi, was there, which was an unreal experience because like we keep in touch, but just seeing the person that like you played hide and go seek with when you were 3 years old or 2 years old, and then the stories, like meeting each other's girlfriends and just like talking to them about these stories of when you're 3 and you remember them. That was wild, especially after champagne. So like just different things get spoke about after treated my mom to some Krug champagne, which is my favorite champagne, and like getting that for her retirement and stuff. Anyway, so wholesome time. Paris was a debacle. Loved Paris, but I feel like, so today I've already was up at whatever time and already mixed the song and came back, and I feel different. I feel like I got back from Paris and I wasn't really ready because I knew about the New York trip a few days later, and then jet lag was real. When you're somewhere for 2 weeks, you can't avoid the jet lag of a 9-hour difference. So today I feel like I'm back in it. I feel like I have a lot to say today, if you can't tell already by where I'm at. So I'm pumped to be doing this with you.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to start off. I mean, we got it's funny. I would say last night it was like we got a few questions in, and I responded to a few folks, sent them to the Discord, sent them to the YouTube, which I was mentioning earlier, the Clips channel, which has become this great resource. There's hundreds of videos on there now. And then we got a whole bunch of great questions like in the last hour. I wanted to start off by talking about a challenge that I'm going through, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And if you can't yet, you're gonna, which is that 10 days ago, my computer stopped working. And I still don't have it back. And I realize even after doing this for years, I need another solution. And I think I've figured it out. I had a few people give me some good advice on it. But, you know, when a computer goes down, especially if you are a producer, mixer, whatever, where you have all of your settings, all of your plugins, you know, I have libraries of samples and all the stuff's backed up. It's all backed up into the cloud. I learned that lesson long ago, to have multiple backups of things, and the cloud backup is very important. But of course, a system with my specs, with a fast enough computer to run full sessions, you know, I had deadlines that I was supposed to have last week, and fortunately people are lenient because I'm usually very on time about things, and they actually can't do anything about it anyway, because I basically can't open a full production and mix session on my laptop. And this is the challenge of now doing this nomadic life, is I normally I had another computer backup. So I was initially told it's going to be 3 to 5 days. Called on day 5. They said, "Oh, I don't know why I told you 3 to 5. It's 5 to 7." I did this all through Apple Care. Everything's covered, all of that. But of course, it's, you know, I'm without a computer, and the question is, and by the way, now it's been 10 days, and it's going to be 3 to 4 more days. So I don't know what's going on. I assume Apple is just doing what Apple does, and it's taking a long time. Maybe it's the pandemic, maybe it's my computer. But the alternate solution for me is buying a new computer. But if I'm going to get my main computer back, spending $4 or $5 grand for a new computer and reloading everything is time consuming and expensive and unnecessary if I'm getting it back in a week. And I realized that a few people said this, what I should have done is had, you know, a 2 terabyte SSD clone of my drive, of my whole computer, so that I could just run it.
I always have that. It's every minute. It's doing that every day. Time Machine does that, right? So
well, and so I just didn't do that. I have the computer backed up into the cloud, so I have everything on my computer available, but I don't have a machine that is ready to boot off of.
If that were to happen, I know they say 3 to 5 days, but there's no harm in having a backup if you can afford it. So that would be the time to invest in your backup, just to have, right?
Yeah.
Granted, if you were in LA right now, this probably wouldn't be as much of an issue because you have a community of people surrounding you that you could jump in. Like if you had to drive to me from Malibu in an hour, you could come open up a session, and I'm sure it would open up pretty close to where it was and do stems, right? I've had friends have to do that, just like, come through, let's get this done. You're out of your comfort zone and your space, and that works creatively, but it doesn't work for reliability aspect of it, right?
Yeah, and so
you have to weigh that. It's bad timing. It's bad timing.
That's the challenge of being both a finisher person and a songwriter, producer, you know, idea person, is that making the decision to spend this next however amount of time, maybe it's going to be a year, being nomadic, is really focusing on the ideas, you know, writing, doing lots of sessions, doing lots of remote things, making it challenging for myself. And it turns out sometimes it gets really challenging. So the comfortable system with all my gear in order to finish records where I'm really doing full mixes and finishing productions, if the computer goes out, even just being able to print stems doesn't quite do it, because then I might get a mix note the next day that I need to change something on the guitar, and then I don't have a system that has all of my plugins, all of the versions, exactly the right processing, all of that. So
bootable clone running at all times is very important. And if you can afford a backup machine, I mean, I constantly toy with the idea of having, because I don't want to buy another, you know, my computer is $10,000, right? So I don't want another 10 grand computer, but I could buy a Mac Mini that is almost up to spec of my iMac Pro and have that, so I could do this if possible. I wouldn't do that now necessarily, but if my system were to die today and I had to deliver 13 mixes this week, I would do that, spend 4 or 5 grand, and then have a backup, and then this never happens again. So I mean, if you can afford it, preventatively have a backup computer. This is my advice to the world for this to happen to people. And if you can't, and then it happens, then do it.
Yeah, the backup drive is the way to go. The clone running off.
That's the easy way. That should happen at all times. That would never happen to me, thankfully. So I'm sorry you're going through this, but yes, it's one place I didn't plan out, because I have a backup system
but it's in LA. I'm not traveling with multiple computers. I'm traveling with the one computer. I'm actually traveling with a MacBook Air as well, because I don't have an iPad. It's like sort of my little computer, and I do other stuff on it. Because I try to keep my main computer being just a music computer. I think that's also great advice for young people, young record makers. If you can commit to getting to the point where your music laptop or your music computer or whatever is just for music, you start, torrenting files and getting viruses or loading it up with other stuff. It's going to lead you to a crunch at some point, as it does for all of us. But I did not do the calculation of, oh wait, I no longer have a backup system, which so rarely happens. I just wasn't thinking about it, and it's my mistake. So I'm eating the cost, if not financially, then at least logistically. So there was a couple of sessions this week. I was like, I'm not ready to do it. So today I've decided, there's a computer here at the studio, and the computer is great. So I'm just going to set it up to work well enough to do sessions at the end of the week. And then hopefully at the end of the week or top of next week, I'll get my computer back with a replaced Logic board, so the computer works. And then in the meantime, I'm definitely going to get an SSD drive, another one, and as soon as I get my computer back, I'm making a bootable clone of it. But yeah,
no excuses.
Those stresses are real. But this is how we learn, and hopefully people don't have to go through this. Get a clone of your main drive and make it happen.
Tonight,
yeah,
just do it
tonight.
today.
Everybody,
Amazon one and get one right now.
Yeah, man. Well, you've had a lot of stuff. You have a lot of stuff, or at least a few big things come out in the last few weeks. There were lots of questions about it. You want to talk about either the Lost in the Citadel mix or the G-Eazy mix, or a few people asked about both of those. And give shout out. X asked about it. Theo asked about it. A few people wanted to know if you got any stories on those records.
Yeah, that Lost in the Citadel mix is cool. It's actually the third.
It's a really great sounding mix. I like that one a lot. I haven't listened to G-Eazy stuff, but
thank you. The Lost in the Citadel thing was interesting because it's the third song I did for Nas, and only one made the record. Actually, when I'm mixing three, the other two, one of them is nobody's credited, and one of them I think went to Manny. Not sure why. Didn't hear till it came out. Which is always lame, so we should just say that here because that shit happens at every level.
Explain what happened there. So, because just slow it down for people that aren't used to this process. It was a song that got sent to multiple people, and then they paid everyone, and then they just picked one at the end.
I guess so, which is funny to me. Without communication, I think the communication part is the letdown part. It happening, it is what it is. I still prefer my mix on the other one, but I wish it was that much better, Mandy's mix, that I can go, damn, that shit sounds crazy, so I can be like, fuck, I need to get better. It just sounded like anyway, I don't want to actually go there. That's really irresponsible.
Sounded like his thing, and they picked it for whatever reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So but the third song came in, this Lost in the Citadel, and I was like, oh damn, this is one of my favorite songs I've heard in a long time. This energy is so good. Nas screaming like that, doing that kind of punk emo thing. It was really cool to hear him do that. I'm glad I got that record. That's something that I would have loved to mix, a decade and a half ago when I started doing rock records, emo records, hardcore records, all that stuff. So it felt really authentic to me. So I'm kind of glad that it came through. The interesting thing about that one to me that really opened up the whole song record mix to me was at one specific move that is, fun to share, which is John Cunningham, who produced it, is amazing. The bass guitar was an octave high. So there was no bass when it came over, which is really interesting. So all I did, the first move I made when I heard that was I pitched the bass down the octave, and all of a sudden the record sounded closer to done, right? It was like a very specific, one of those creative moves where you're like, I'm not going to boost 60 hertz here. There's no actual low end in this bass. What do I do here? I just drop it down an octave. All of a sudden, it feels like a modern record. Where I think some of those punk records in the 90s, some Nirvana records, the bass is up high on the neck, and it works how compressed things are, how loud things are. Those kinds of records weren't about the low end. But a Nas record competing with R&B records, there's some trap records on there, there's rap records, there's pop records, there's all these kinds of records. So this rock record needs to fit with those, right? I had the privilege of hearing and working on two other ones before this, so I knew what they were going for otherwise. But I still would have assumed that this record needs sub. So pitched that shit down, pitched a couple of the drums down to kind of give it that low-end energy that I'm always going for, instead of like a 90s rock reference doesn't need to sound like the 90s. You know, we've talked about that. When people are referencing a time, it still needs to exist in today. So I'm never going to try to make a 70s referenced record sound like the 70s, because they've done it better than what we're doing. They've already done that. An 80s record doesn't have to sound like the 80s now, you know?
Right.
So I'm just hearing this nostalgia and trying to maintain, you know, whatever 2021, 2022 to 2025 is going to be sounding like.
Yeah.
But that'll come up for the rest of, you know, that record for me, is hearing that and going, oh, the bass is, there's no sub. What do? Pitch it down. Cool. That's a big move.
Did you duplicate it, or did you just replace it with the octave down? Like,
I just went down. I don't even think I duped it.
Yeah.
It was just so much. It was so obvious. It wasn't like ooh, I'm not sure if he's going to like this. It was, no, that's what needs to happen. I probably had to, you know, replace some upper harmonics in the bass tone now that the octave was down. I don't actually remember, so don't quote me fully on this. I'm pretty sure I removed the higher octave by the end, because then there's phasing in the bass, and we don't need that. So I'm pretty sure it just sounded like, oh, this is what it was supposed to feel like.
There's a version of this question that gets asked a lot, which is, I'm the mastering engineer, the mix isn't quite right. Do I make big changes? I'm the mix engineer, but the production feels like I could do this and this, or I'm the producer and the song needs a little. How do you have those conversations? That's a question that gets asked a lot. So what was your relationship with, is Jon who produced
Jon,
it, right?
Yeah, I didn't have to have the conversation, because he was just like, yo, this sounds dope. And we were done in like a couple of mixes.
Had you worked together before?
Nope. It was just an instinct thing. Just like, this is what someone's coming you for, right? Is your taste and instinct.
Yes.
And then it's going to be a match or it's not. And that's fine. I would have loved to have the conversation. I didn't feel like I needed to have the conversation.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. I don't always feel like I have to have a conversation with someone before mixing. If the record is pretty obvious what they're going for, a lot of the time the vibe and the energy is caked in. So I don't have to have that conversation. For me, like, if, you know, you've seen my speakers, if there's no sub coming through, how much sound and power I have in these speakers, then something's wrong. So I have to figure out, you know, what's causing that. And it was very clear that there was nothing below 100 hertz in the bass. It wasn't filtered. It was just where it was placed. And in his rough mix, having a limiter slammed on it, you don't notice that because you're bringing out those harmonics. It's so loud. Oh my God, that's so funny. Kimbra's like, what are you working on right now? Your record. I guess I'm allowed to say that if the artist is saying it.
Yeah, shout out Kimbra.
So that move, that's like, it's also testing me, right? It's also keeping me up on my feet. Like, did I make the right decision? I'm going to send it back doing this and hope the producer likes it, right? Because that's my gut. But I'm not quite sure always if someone's going to understand it and like it. And he did.
Yeah, I think the answer for a lot of people is, as you go deeper into this, if you're being hired for something, if you're there, I mean, there's different places you are in your career and different relationships you have with people, but very often if you're being hired to mix something, somebody's bringing you on board because they want your ears and your taste. I had a thing with another similar example to this, but from the production and songwriting side. I got connected to an A&R a couple of weeks ago that was looking for someone to help finish production. And she was saying, we can't get the production right. And somebody said, you should call Matt. He's done a bunch of records for me. So I Zoomed with her and she's like, we've got these great songs, but can't get the production. We've got a few different producers working on it. Can I send you the songs? Tell me what you think. So I listened to the songs and I hit her back and I said, I don't think it's a production issue. I think the songs need a little bit of work, mm-hmm. and then the production will make sense. I mean, that's a very common thing. There's many memes and sort of idioms in the music industry about you can't fix something in the mix. You can't make a great song. If the song isn't good, you can't produce your way into a great song. And so I went back and said, hey, I know you're asking me for production, but I think it's this and this and this. But the reason she called me is she wanted my opinion. And so now I'm going to get with the artist and we're going to work on the songs a little bit more and then get into production. And the truth is, if you come in straightforwardly and use your taste and trust your instincts, very often that's actually much more appreciated. Now, you don't want to, if somebody has a really intense vision and you go and screw up their song, be prepared to be told, you changed a bunch of stuff. I don't like that. Oftentimes, if it's a new relationship, communication is important, or give them two versions. Sometimes giving them one version with confidence is the right thing, but there's no right answer for it. But very often, if you are being called on to help finish something in whatever capacity, whether it's production or mixing or whatever, your ears and your opinion are a part of that. And so don't be afraid to go in and listen to your instincts and have a conversation.
I want to also, on that note, I've been wanting to bring this up on an episode with you, and this is a perfect song to use as an excuse, and it goes with what you're saying too, which is, how many episodes have you and I done? Like 55 probably, I think.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. And, maybe half of them or more have discussed how I don't compress or like to compress. And when I was on a vacation, in Paris, I was like meditating on a couple of things. And one was, I think people, thanks Bradley 58. I think people get this kind of version or perspective, this caricature of me as a mixer, that like, this guy doesn't ever compress.
He's the anti-compression guy.
Yeah, anti-compression guy, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And I should set the record straight and say that I did compress on that mix. I'm pretty sure there's a subtle mix bus compressor. It just wanted it. Like, there's no limiter on that one, and there's a compressor on that one, right? There's still a clipper, and it's all subtle, but that song, that type of energy, that louder rock, driving thing, to me, requires that, and it wanted that, so I used one on that mix. That also being said, I tried compressing a drum bus on another style record, and all I can say after I put it on was, ew, that's fucking gross. Like, that's not what drums need to sound like. So different songs, which compressor? Oh, I use the Ozone 9 Dynamics, the one I talk about all the time. Very subtly, but that kind of record wants that energy, right? So we should just set the record straight that when I say I don't do something, it just means I don't always jump to it, and some records need it, and that's been your perspective on it. So I'm going to revert every time I've ever said, just today, this is a big episode for me. I do understand compressors and why they might be used. I don't think it's a go-to tool for me, but I do use them. So since we've done 58 episodes, on episode 59.
Well, look,
I like compressors.
And for those that haven't watched the dozens of hours of us talking,
it just sounds like a joke at this point. Because I get DM'd about it, like, oh, I hear you don't compress, and I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. Like,
yo, you just link them to the episode where we talk about compression. Okay. I don't know, we did an hour or 2 hours, like send them to that, because the big thing that I was trying to do in that episode, somebody on the chat can tell us which episode that was where we talked about compression. I don't know if we did 2 hours or just one, but this idea of a compressor and compression being two different things, that, using a compressor is a particular tool that compresses, but there's lots of other ways to do dynamic range compression that did not exist 20, 30, 40 years ago, when compressors and limiters, which are very similar tools, were the only ways to do that, other than doing things by hand. But there's so many ways with clip gain and saturators and transient shapers to get the effect of a compressor without relying on what is a very singular tool. It does a narrow set of things that are very good. It's a very intense part of contemporary music and all of popular music for the last 80 years. But there's other ways to do it that, if you want to really learn how to geek out, dig in, and make amazing sounding stuff, it's like when I talked to Baines, and Baines went through his vocal chain of plugins, there were compressors on there, but there were like 10 plugins, and it was like, this saturator's doing a little bit, and this limiter's doing a little bit, and this de-esser's doing a little bit, and those are all ways to dynamically adjust what you're doing to dynamically compress the range of volumes. But yes, of course, compressors can be the right thing sometimes too.
I just like, I don't know, having perspective break from work, right? I didn't work for 2 weeks, which I've
how was that? How was it not working?
Great, man. Let's be honest. It was fucking great. I've never gone that long without craving mixing, and all I wanted to do was wander around Paris, look up, eat food, drink champagne, be romantic, like, I didn't really want to do anything else. And I never once thought about mixing, which has never happened in my life. And I'm 35. It's like first time. That felt good. This trip in New York, quick, 2.5 days or whatever it was, like I knew what was coming across the desk and I couldn't wait to get back. So that was a little different, but the trip to Paris, yeah, that was great. But I did think about some things. I thought about what's next. I thought about the Conversations podcast, not doing Live with Matt Rad for 3 weeks, and what I would come and want to discuss and what I want to do in the future. And one of those things that came up was, I feel like if people are watching these episodes, I need to be a little bit more careful about talking about what I don't do instead of talking about what I do. And talking about what I don't do will pigeonhole you into things that, may be falsely pigeonholed, right? Like, oh, you can't mix a pop record because you don't compress. It's like, oh, that's not a good thing for my career. It's not a good thing for people to think about me when they think about who I am and what I do and what I bring to records. So I thought I should be honest about that publicly, that I think I made a mistake saying that I don't do something, because I know I've said it that way. I know that's not the way I always say it, but I know I've said it. And the whole point of being regular on these episodes and just publicly in vision, in sight, is to admit when you make mistakes. And I should just set the record straight that on Lost in the Citadel, there are compressors on there. There are more limiters and tube and tape saturation emulations than compressors by total amount. But I would be lying if I said that I didn't compress on that mix, and that mix is better because of compression.
Well, I one of the things I think people appreciate so much about these conversations, the vast majority of which are you and I, and now getting some other mixers on here, is that, and other record makers, it's really nice to hear someone evolve as well. I mean, this is why so many podcasters, I mean, Joe Rogan sort of being the ultimate example, that the people that have decided to talk for hours over the course of years, why it's become such an interesting format is because you see someone reconsider opinions, try new things, talk about what they thought about a year ago, and how they're thinking about it differently. So I actually don't think it's a mistake at all that you declared things early on, because that's part of your evolution as a person. And truthfully, like, I think more of what's most valuable about these conversations, from what I can gather talking to people, is it just makes people feel less crazy for being in a room by themselves, making things, not knowing if what they're doing is right. Nobody they grew up with understands what they're doing. Their parents don't understand, their friends, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, whatever. And the reality is there's tens of thousands of us that make records in some form. Like, we're all the same. All these people watching this or listening to this, like, we're all the same. We're just at different places, different opportunities, different parts of our arc, have different needs and different desires. But like, the reality is, like, we're all hopefully evolving. I mean, that's the goal, I think, of being a creative person, is not to work and then get to a point and then be like, cool, I've done what I needed to do and now I'm done. Like, all of us want to keep evolving and keep learning and declare things and be like, this is what I do and this is how it's different. And then a year later go, yes, I still believe that kind of, but also, that's the evolution that I think is actually really, really helpful to people. So I think, rather than it being a mistake, I think it's actually great for you to have declared something in a small clip, but then we explain it over the course of hours also. And you're evolving and you're mixing on pop records and hip hop records and R&B records and all kinds of stuff. And I think it's in the long run, nothing but positive for you and for everyone else. I agree. Cool.
So now that that's been said, let's answer some questions for people.
Let's see here. There was some discussion about this on the Discord, so I would actually, Soundguards, I think was the person's name, advice about trying to be a mix engineer with tinnitus. I'm not sure how to say it.
I don't know how to speak on that. That's that's my worst nightmare. So
yeah, that's very tough. I don't have any immediate answers. There was some discussion on the Discord.
How bad is it?
Yeah, I think on the meditation channel, actually, because there was some research about meditation reducing people's tinnitus. I'm not exactly sure, but please go check out the Discord. There's some great discussion about that on the meditation channel. But
I wish we were friends with Sam Harris, because Sam Harris runs the meditation app that I use, and a lot of people.
Did you do the daily today?
Yeah, I did, and he
talked about it.
I've known that he's had it for quite a bit, since I've started following him 5 or 6 years ago or whatever, but I've always had this odd empathy for him and compassion for him, knowing it. Like, I feel like I almost know him because of that, and like how he can stay so so meditative, you know, and so zen, for lack of better words, and knowing that that's there. And he referred to it as loud today, that it's a loud buzzing. You know, my younger brother lost his hearing in one of his ears because he was at a gun shooting range, and before he put his ear protection on, lost, you know, the gun went off by his friend, and he, you know, it's damaged. I think it's even almost gone. And then one of my best friends growing up in high school, Mikey, had tinnitus, and he still has it. And I hear horror stories about how you lose sleep, and we know how important sleep is. Like, I don't, and there's nothing that really fixes it. Yeah, people are saying like, oh, magnesium taurate helps, and magnesium threonate. Like, yeah, these could help, but nothing cures it. Except for constant noise, right? So you're going to want to make something louder because of that. I don't know. This is going to be a strong claim. I would figure out what frequency that buzz is happening in an hearing test, because that means you're not going to be able to hear that. So depending on the importance of the region of that, of where that frequency is, it's going to be very difficult for you to hear clearly in that zone, and you might want to put a handicap on your mix bus to maybe not reduce in that range as much, because you don't, or boost in that range as much, because the clarity in your hearing there is not going to be accurate, which is going to cause you trouble in getting approvals. I've thought about this a fair amount. I just don't know how necessarily to advise on it. I would get a hearing test and know where it is.
A couple of people unsure what tinnitus or tinnitus is. I don't know how to say it. I'm not supposed to say it, but
tinnitus.
Yeah, it's basically some form of continual high frequency, or perhaps any frequency,
mid-range,
usually a high frequency buzz or ringing that's kind of always happening, and usually from some sort of hearing damage. But my understanding is it can be genetic. You know, over the course of time, everybody's hearing deteriorates, so it may just start happening. I don't know if for people that have chronic tinnitus, if the frequency changes over time. I mean, I think the answer to someone trying to be a music professional is, you do your research and figure out what you can do to make it better in terms of just making it less impactful in your life. I mean, the people I know that have it consistently, you just kind of get used to it. I mean, things like meditation, good diet, good exercise, good sleep, all of that is, I think, are good tools. But those are great tools for just keeping you sane generally. And I think if you have a chronic ringing, there are I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but I believe George Martin had it at some point later in his life. Like, there are successful record makers that have a little bit of ringing in their ears, or a lot of it. I don't know how much any of these people have, and it's a burden. It's tough. I think and whether you have it or not, protecting your ears, getting a big jar of 30 plus dB foam earplugs so you wear them on airplanes. And I wear earplugs in long car rides. I have the noise cancellation on these going when I ride the subway, or when I'm outside. Protecting your hearing is a hugely important part of, I think, everybody's life, but especially those of us that are trying to be professionals at this. And I don't have a good answer, but
I have custom earplugs, and they're in my pocket for any event that I'm going to that's going to be loud. Sometimes even social gatherings. If it's a party, I'll still bring them just in case. For the airplane, I walk around with molded earplugs with 25 dB filters in them.
Damn, Mike Dean. Somebody said Mike Dean had washed the throne with only one ear. He had a burst eardrum. That's an interesting fact, if true.
It's like. Okay, hold on. Let's just talk about that fact for just a quick second. That record doesn't like objectively sound so crazy good that it's like, you know, worth necessarily commenting on the sonics of that record. It's one of the greatest hip hop records ever made. Yeah. Let's be real. Some of the productions are incredible, but that's some like UFC type shit that is not necessarily like an admirable
don't try
decision.
It. Don't try it at home.
Decision to make it at home, you know, for yourself, because that record's going to come out sounding however it is and do whatever it's going to do because the people that are attached to that record, not because the sound of it. And your life, your health and longevity is more important than getting through a record with one ear.
Well, I don't think the idea is that's a good idea, but the idea is you can still make records even with a handicap.
Yeah, but I've heard it mentioned like it's some heroic act. Like, I know that fact. I know that fact. It was mentioned.
By the way, I'm not mad at that being mentioned, but I understand what you mean.
Totally.
You should protect your hearing, but it also should be encouraging to people that have disabilities of any kind that you can still make great things, and that's really beautiful. Protect your fucking hearing, though, because you do not want to be trying to make records with one ear, because Mike Dean was already pretty entrenched and knew how to get shit done. I wouldn't do a lot of practicing if you get hired for gigs, just plugging up one ear and seeing if you can mix.
Yeah. Furry Drip, yes, I would without a doubt bring them to a concert. That's the first place that I would bring them, because sound systems are upwards of 110 to 120 at events like that to cover a whole large space. So that's where I would go first. I bring them as a backup to a party just in case it's super loud and people are yelling. But for me, I'm really sensitive since I was a kid. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but my first memory ever is covering my ears when a fire truck went by during a parade in front of my house on Long Island. It's my first memory. I don't know how old I was, 18 months, 2 years, whatever. A dog barks and I'm in pain.
You came into consciousness with a loud sound.
Yes.
That's crazy.
And I'll never forget that. And, I get laughed at even now. Like even now walking down the street, if something happens, my girlfriend will put a finger in her ear. In my ear, it's become a joke, like protecting, like maybe I don't have the reaction to do it yet. Like a dog barks and she's like,
if I hear a siren coming long before anyone else notices, I'm like this for sure.
Yeah. So that's the level that Matt and I are talking about.
I have a
reflex.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just the reflex is all.
I have a pair of 33, whatever the sort of highest end consumer, the highest dB consumer earplugs are, the foam earplugs. I have a jar of them somewhere. And I have a pair of them or two pairs of them in every fifth pocket and pants that I own, every jacket that I own, several pairs in my laptop bag, in my suitcase. I just have earplugs at all times just in case. Because if somebody's like, hey, we're going to go to this thing and it's a bar and it's loud, if you can't have a conversation at this level with someone, if you're going to be there for any duration, it's gonna be loud. Yeah. I am wearing earplugs on those subway rides, Miggy. Absolutely. Hell yeah. Well, actually, what I'm wearing is these now, and I turn on the noise cancellation.
Exactly. That's cool too.
And it works great. I actually, on some level, want to even do the 33 dB because it's more than these. But I like listening to music. Going to the studio gets me hyped up.
I've been doing earplugs with the AirPod Max over ears as well.
Yeah, we should get earplugs and then the extreme isolation headphones. So there's 55 dB.
All right.
Just a full crazy person everywhere. Let's see. Oh, there was it's great because the auto correct on this. This guy, a young, I think he's a mix engineer named Alex Tummy, asked, "When are you both visiting me?"
Young Alex Tumay.
Alex, kid with a future. Alex, if you're watching this, I'm going to come see you soon because I'm in your city.
Alex, I'm not, but I'll be in New York for most of December, so I'm going to come visit you in December and see your new spot. It looks great being put together. I'm excited to come by.
Yeah, big shout out to Alex, who's seems like he's moving spots every 4 months, but
every 4 months.
But he's one of the best. Hey, there he is. There he is. Alex Tummy himself in the chat. Yeah, man, I'm gonna. Well, I don't have a computer, so I can't get to work. So I'm gonna come see you in the next couple of days. So yeah, shout out Alex. Let's see.
Hit me with it.
This is a very. I feel like it's a very John question. And we've talked about it a little bit before, but Bobby asked, "How do you assess?" I don't know if I copied this question correctly, but how do you assess your heart pulling you one way but career another? John goes wide-eyed.
Okay, let's talk about it. Let's go. We got 20 minutes.
I think the reality of that question there's lots of ways to think about that question.
I've been thinking about it every day since I got back from Paris.
I will say I think about it all the time. It's a question I think about constantly. And the great hope is that those two things line up beautifully, that you can do exactly what you want. And that doesn't mean you don't do things that you avoid things that are extremely challenging, or you don't do things because they'll get you to the next thing. But the ultimate goal, I think, especially appropriately selfish creative people, is that we make things that are from our hearts. We make things that make us feel something, that we really enjoy the process, that we would do for free or were doing for free for a very long time, but then that becomes our career. That is the goal, I think, in a lot of ways. But it is a difficult journey where you really have to continually reassess that, because there may be a point at which you may even have lots of success and then get to the point where you're like, I'm not doing the things I love anymore. I want to go do something else, or I want to do a different version of this. And that means sacrificing career. I don't think there's an immediate answer, other than I think all of us, if we're paying attention, are thinking about that question and evaluating it. I have more specific thoughts, but you got a reaction to that?
I have a lot. I have a whole hour on this one.
Well, you just took a break for 2 weeks for the first time. I'm sure all you did was think about it. You're like, this is amazing. Can I get paid to look at buildings in Paris and drink champagne? Because that would be
exactly.
Nice.
I probably wouldn't live here anymore if it wasn't for a music industry in LA. I would probably go visit Alex Tummy and try to be doing this in New York. I would probably
come on over, baby. We're having a good time here.
There's a lot more I'm trying to say here. I would probably want to live in Paris 6 months out of the year, and just enjoy life, and travel about from there as my home. And that would make me happier, I think, than mixing records all the time. I would always want to mix records. I love music and I love mixing records, but I wouldn't do it as often if I didn't have to do it. I think at this point, I'm recognizing that. Oh, I have to sustain a certain lifestyle that I've built for myself. And
that's another whole conversation.
That's what I mean. We could talk about this for endless amounts of time. I don't want to downsize my studio. I love my studio. So I was going to say that this is all under the question of what makes you happier. And I think there's the city that you live in it has a lot to do with it. I think there's so much to be thankful for living in a city like this. The culture is so versatile here. All you can want when it comes to social events, outings, food, drink, nature, exploration, discovery is here, as it is in New York as well. It's not like that everywhere. And I was talking to my landlord today, catching up at the coffee shop, because I just got back into town. We just ran each other at the coffee shop, talking about, he actually asked me how much longer I'm going to be in the loft, because he's renegotiating a lease with the owner of the whole, basically the whole block that I live on, this one older man owns. And I was like, man, I'm going to have to be here at least 5 more years. I gotta stay in LA. That's my plan. My plan is to be here, but saying that out loud doesn't necessarily make me happy, right? It doesn't add, any sort of contentment is there, right? So when I think about that, what I really want to say here, and that's just the context, is be mindful of your serotonin levels and your happiness, your calmness, your being okay with what's here and now, and not always constantly chasing the dopamine hits, right? This is a longer conversation and way more scientific than I or you are capable of having, but on a small scale, we can constantly be we can discuss how we're constantly chasing new things as creatives. Specifically, Lil Nas record drops, G-Eazy drops. They're the same day, and I'm like, well, what's next? What am I doing? I'm not happy about that. But if it were up to me, knowing that, I would try to revel in the happiness of those releases a little bit longer than I naturally do. But that's the sign of our industry. Our industry is you're the color of the week. You're the color of the month. If anything, you can be the color of 18 months. That's the longest, right? And that's okay. But to constantly chase that is endless, right? So I don't know, right? If I were to make a move somewhere else, that this wouldn't come up again in 3-4 years. So I am now trying to, modulate serotonin to maintain calm and comfort and happiness in what is as much as possible. That can be from food sources, meditation practice, walking, just simply being grateful, and not in some new age cafe gratitude type of way, in a true sense of, no, I'm just grateful to be here. This is super cool that we can talk about Lost in the Citadel mix and the fact that G-Eazy and Demi Lovato are performing a song tonight on Kimmel that is the single and that came out that I mixed. Like, those things are super cool. I do love them, but I'm also stoked to mix Kimbra today. Like, when I get off the call with you, that's what I'm about to go do. And she's pumped, I'm pumped. That's cool. When I'm done with her record, what's going to be the next one that I'm super pumped about? And that is endless. So I'd like to consider what happiness looks like outside of it, as well as with it, because mixing does make me really happy. And you also know that, who are sending me the records. They really do. I had a great morning mixing today. So.
Well, I want to say two things. I love hearing that from you. The first thing is, everybody watching this or listening should Google the phrase lifestyle inflation. Understand what that is. Understand how all of us, or almost everybody I know, with the exception of a rare few who I admire tremendously, succumb to it at some point in our life. This idea that you get a little bit more money, you get a few more things, you get access to more stuff, and then you very quickly get used to that. You get excited because you're like, oh, I can do new things. I can travel, or I can, whatever. I get instead of a apartment I'm sharing with another person, I can get my own one bedroom. And that feels really amazing for a little while, but then you get used to it. We as human beings get used to things very quickly. So
very quickly.
Lifestyle inflation.
It can be 30 seconds.
Yes, very much so. So
dopamine tapers off within 30 to 45 seconds from a lot of things.
So the other thing I want to say is, and
quick illusions.
I may have told this story before, but I'll just frame it as the world. The world is set up such that what you are praised for and incentivized to pursue is not necessarily the thing that is going to make you happy. And in fact, much of the time will keep you on a hamster wheel, like chasing of things that will ultimately not make you happy. And we can talk about dopamine versus serotonin, but the idea of chasing something and getting something, achieving your desires, is the great Naval quote, which is, desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get something. But as soon as you get it, you're done. That's a moment in time. But all the time leading up to it, you're like, I'm not going to be happy until I get this thing. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have desires, but it means you should be very, very careful about what you choose to do. And so much of both the music industry, Instagram, pop culture, whatever, is showing you that people who are achieving things with charts or numbers or financially or whatever are the mark of success. But as someone, and as Jon just said, and as someone who's had a bunch of big moments, those moments are very fleeting. I mean, I remember the story I'll tell, the first really big record that I had a few things that were on the radio and a few things I'd written and produced. But the first One Direction song I did, the song called Best Song Ever, where I was a co-producer on, I finished the production. I wasn't really in the pop music producer world, but that song came out, and this is before streaming was really big. So it was iTunes was a thing, and the song came out. I'd worked on a couple months before. The song came out, and it was #1 in 65 countries. It was the first big thing I'd done, and like, holy shit, #1 in 65 countries. And it was a great day, and got lots of phone calls, and both people coming out of the woodwork and also people that had known me for a long time saying, congratulations, you're very talented, you deserve this. Really, really nice things. The joy of that, which was the craziest career achievement I could have imagined at the time, that lasted for maybe 36 hours. It was like, this is so awesome. This is so awesome. This is so awesome. And 36 hours later, I was like, all right, well, what am I doing today? I'm going to go work on the thing I've been working on the last week or two. So like the most extreme thing I can imagine gave me essentially an ongoing dopamine hit for 36 hours. And that's about the peak of what you can get. I mean, I assume people winning a Grammy, that sort of thing, there's a great Robin Williams video about this when he's on a late night show and he's talking about winning the Oscar for Good Will Hunting. And he's like, yeah, you win it and it's great for a day. And then you're back to being an actor and you're back to, but we all look at those things as, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You go to LA, you have a big career, you're on big records, everybody's talking about you, you hit the charts, all that kind of stuff. And there are things about that that are signifiers for doing great work. If you're doing things you love and they get all these accolades, those things are really beautiful. So it's not to say that those things aren't important. I mean, I've railed on the Grammys as, I think trophies for art is dumb. blah, 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 blah. I also think it's wonderful for people to be recognized for their work. It's a bit of a contradiction in the way I feel about it, but I know that a lot of those big achievement number signpost things, they're not ultimately what's going to make you happy. And it's great to hear you talk about some of this stuff, having just had 2 big mixes on 2 big records, a big single, you got things coming out, but you've been through this game to know not that you aren't proud of those things. We've talked about your desire to do more pop stuff. We've talked about the challenges of being on records, then not being on the next thing, but then people coming back. All of these things are really important conversations to be had. And the reality is, like, you gotta find the day-to-day process that you love. Because if you're just chasing, you're going to be fucking miserable. And I know a lot of people like that. So we've talked about this before. There's interviews on other podcasts. I don't want to like fully name names, but you can listen to other record makers talk. And a lot of the ones that are the most successful, they're losing their minds that they're not on the top of the chart in that moment. And when they're on the top of the chart, they're freaked out that they're not going to be on the top of the chart the next week.
Again, yeah.
You don't want to be those people. You don't want to be a person like that. It's not their fault. It's part of all of our journeys to figure this stuff out. Some people figure it out earlier than others. But the reality is, getting back to the question of, your heart versus your career, you only get one life, as far as I can tell, as far as I know, as far as anybody I know can prove thus far. You better be going after the heart stuff rather than the career. You got to survive. You got to pay bills. Of course. But if we're talking about working professionals, and even not necessarily working professionals, if you're making music because you love it, to me, that's the ultimate thing. If you're sacrificing your love of music in order to achieve certain numbers or achieve financial whatever, I don't know anybody that's happy like that. I just don't. I don't know a single person.
I love grabbing an EQ and adding clarity to a mix, man. I got to admit how dorky that this,
but that's beautiful.
This guy is. It's so much fun to me when I take that and I scroll through a zone of mud and I pull it out and it's like, oh, there it is. Like, there's not much more gratifying than doing that to someone's record and making them feel it a different way, right? That is, but at the same time, we have to admit, and that's why I'm talking about this and admitting guilt to it, which is, I love when I have big records come out and people hit me up and think it's great, because I like validation. We all do. We all want to celebrate our accolades to some degree. It's when you get hung up on that's the reason why you do it that it can get a little bit, it can just get dark. It's not really what it's about, but humans need validation.
Yeah, validation is very important. Validation is very important.
That's something to recognize and be okay with it. Be okay with needing it. And when you get it, let's get back to it. Let's get back to humble and back to it. And it's nice. And
get back to what you enjoy. Getting back to the process, the day-to-day thing. You're going to spend most of your life in the process of making things, not having finished things out there that people go, I like that. Most of your life is going to be the process of making records or whatever your day-to-day is. That's the part you should focus on enjoying.
Yes, enjoying. And then the necessity aspect of having the releases that people can hear is then they can point and say, this person did this. I'm going to have that person do this for me. And it is the sad truth that it's the only way that you actually get work is people like what you do on any level. I'm not saying that only in the top 10 and the hits, that someone heard it and said, this is how my career started. Someone on Long Island heard a hardcore band that I recorded and mixed and was like, I want my bass drum to sound like that. Clickety, 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 clack. Just like, he knows how to make this sound good. So let's get him to do our record. And then all the way up to whatever, Lil Nas X, and the stories in between, the majority of it, yes, is the process. But the only reason I got Lil Nas X is because someone recognized my hardcore kick drums, right? Like, that's the trajectory, and it's long, but it's the only way. You can make records. So this is the downside. Like, you can make records for yourself that no one ever hears for however many years you want to do it and never make a dime for it and potentially could be happy from that. Yeah. That wouldn't be me. That's not my chemical makeup.
But it may be some other people, and you
exactly.
If it's going to make you unhappy to stop doing that and do some other version of music, don't do the unhappy thing.
Yes, that's my point. My point is, be mindful of what drives you, and then discover with friends, colleagues, therapists, what is healthy and what is not, and don't take our word for it. I'm just bringing up both sides and admitting what I need to continue as well. And when we talk about lifestyle inflation, I have accessed a certain lifestyle. I'm not a rich person, for the record, but I am rich with life. I live well, I eat well, I take care of myself, I have the time to take care of myself. So I'm privileged in that sense, but it is a decision. And then I will, if in order to upkeep that, I need to work on a certain level of records now. So now I have to care more about that. And that, I mean, I don't have to, right? I say have to, but my experience is that I need to remain. So if that changes, I'll let people know.
Absolutely. And I will say also, which I've recommended a number of times before, if you haven't watched it or haven't watched it recently, the Neil Gaiman commencement speech from like 2011, where he talks about, it's called Make Good Art. It's like 20 minutes of him giving just beautiful advice in this lane of what we're talking about. Applies to all record makers, all creative people.
All creatives.
Really, he's a guy who's been through a lot of arcs and a lot of different things, and it's a great speech to watch. I watch it every few months. It's very inspiring. So Neil Gaiman commencement speech. It's the only one on YouTube. You should watch that. You want to try to run through a couple other little questions?
Sure.
Somebody asked about airy lush reverb. Got any airy lush reverb? There was a more involved question, but I was direct asked it.
So random. Yes, the Sunset Chamber preset in the Seventh Heaven plugin.
It's really nice. Really nice.
It's nice. It's beautiful. That's my answer.
Airy lush reverb. I've been recently putting like either the Valhalla delay or some other delay at like 5% and maybe even taking off the high, maybe 10%, and putting it into the Sunset so it gets a little more just like
it's cool.
warbleness in it. Sometimes you can on
Turns
the delay
drive up.
you can pull off some of the low end on it, and then it just adds a little sparkle out there. I've also liked another Valhalla one. Is it Shimmer? The like weird long.
I've used that on this mix today 7 times. Yeah,
that thing's really cool. It's sort of unruly or unwieldy. I don't know what the word is. It's one of those two, where it's long and crazy, and it doesn't have the same amount of sort of normal reverb parameters. But if you print it and trail it and gate it, and you can do interesting things with it. It's a really nice effect.
I love this question from Pat. You're not rich. I thought musicians at your guys' level are rich as fuck. I'm a mix engineer, bro. not rich. Matt's the producer. He rich.
Yeah, let's also say that there are many of our peers who have a lot more money than we do, that have had a lot more sort of chart and monetary success compared to almost everyone else in the world. Most people watching this are rich as fuck too. I mean, we are certainly very, very fortunate, and by lots of measures, very, very rich. The ability to make records for money and go to Paris for a couple of weeks, which I have enjoyed doing, puts us in rich guy category. It doesn't put us in rapper flossing jewelry craziness category. But again, there's levels to this. And to go back to the conversation about happiness, people can Google this too. There's lots of good studies about money and happiness. And, if you're very poor and you can't pay your bills, making more money will make you happier. Money will buy you happiness because you have security and you're not freaking out about how am I going to pay rent next month. But once you get, and I think the studies are somewhere around 80K, once you make more than $80,000 a year, people do not get happier. And this connects to lifestyle inflation that we were talking about, that there is an amount of money and it's not as much as people think. It's less than 100K. Once you make that much money, more money will not make you happier statistically. Because a big part of that is your basic needs are met, and you're just not going to get more value and meaning out of life by having more things or having more monetary success or any of that. This is we're getting to a philosophy podcast now, but meaning comes from your relationships and yourself and your mental and physical health and people around you and love and connection to family and those sorts of things. So I think we are, both of us, maybe we'll conclude with this, both of us rich by many measures, but most especially in community and love. And we're pursuing those things because ultimately that's where happiness comes from. And that's where the richness of life comes from.
Facts. Till next time.
And all of you, turn up your snare drum. I don't know. Snare drum can't be too loud. Love you, Jon. It's good to see you. It's been a few weeks. We'll be back at it. And I'm sorry I'm not in Los Angeles to come give you a big hug now that you're back. But maybe we'll reconvene in New York. Maybe I'll be back in California for the holidays. We'll figure it out. Cool. Your hair is looking great. It's great to see you. Love you very much. And
love you too.
We'll do this again soon. Thank you guys so much. I'll jump on the Discord after.
Peace.
Peace, guys.